just now, Apex quite literally changed their whole entire firm. Here's everything that you should know about it. First of all, what actually happened? Well, there were many rule changes. So the Apex as we knew it is arguably dead. On top of that, there were price changes. So for example, the subscription fee that you used to pay, that subscription fee is gone. On top of that, there have been payout changes. They make the bold claim in brackets right here that there won't be any more payout denials. They even go as far as to argue that there won't be any payout reviews anymore, hence no denials. So if you go to the payout stage, or you get to the payout stage, and you are eligible for a payout, you request that payout, it will be approved, end of story. That's a very bold claim, something we're going to dive into. In order for them to realize that claim, of course, they need to drastically change some things. So they are introducing 2 new programs, removing the old ones. Then that leaves us with a question, because what happens to your old accounts? These are all things that we are going to dive into. We're going to dive into everything that you should know about the Apex situation, what has changed, and how will it impact you as a trader. First of all, I do think it's quite important to understand, why did this even happen in the first place? What's the motive behind it? Was it financial trouble? Arguably something we're going to dive into. You should also know that affiliates like myself were informed earlier, hence why I can make this video. This, what I'm going to provide you, is objective and neutral information. The reason why I think that's quite important to understand, I am going to share my opinion here and there, but the reason why I think that's quite important to understand is because I'm not here to try and trick you into buying evaluation or accounts or anything like that using my affiliate code. That's just not who I am, how PipBack operates. So no, we are not getting paid for this video. We didn't receive money from Apex or anyone else in order for us to make a promotional video or anything like that here. Of course, you could argue if you decide to use our affiliate code at the end of the day, then yes, indirectly I'm getting paid from this video, but we didn't receive money to make a promotional video, if that makes sense. That's purely for the integrity of PipBack as well. We're objective, we're neutral, we're not in that, if that makes sense. Quite important to understand, we're not in that type of business. Okay, so there will be a lot of people telling you this is the best thing since sliced bread. There will be people spamming their affiliate codes on, for example, Twitter. Quite important to understand, for every positive change, there's also a negative change. Of course, there's always a trade-off to consider. That's all things we're going to discuss right here. But our goal right here is just to properly inform you. And I thought right here, well, this video is very useful because a lot of people trade with Apex as well. So our goal is to properly inform you right here. I'm not going to share my affiliate code before that fact. You first should be informed. Afterwards, you can decide what you want to do. Okay, moving on right here. First, we need to understand, why are they making these changes? Again, changes are usually solutions, right? So there was a problem because solutions, well, you apply solutions to certain problems. So there was a problem with how Apex was operating, which arguably wasn't sustainable. Why? Well, what do we know Apex for? Cheap entry prices, of course. Good scaling, so you can have 20 accounts, a maximum of 20 accounts for relatively cheap. On top of that, solid payouts. And a solid payout, because we, of course, in a different video, analyzed Trustpilot reviews, where we analyzed around 4,000 Apex Trustpilot reviews. Most of the complaints are about payout denials, being very rule heavy as well. But most of the praises are also about payouts being approved. So solid payouts, but cheap entry price, and you can have a maximum of 20 accounts for relatively cheap. That invites a certain type of audience. So the above things invite a lot of scamming, gambling, drama, and issues. People trying to game the system, which eventually becomes unsustainable for an Apex right there, because the more people try to game the system, the more unsustainable in general it becomes, of course. So they had to do something. So could you argue that all of this was because of financial trouble? Well, potentially a part of it, if that makes sense, just to make it more sustainable heading into the future. Now, right here, and that's allegedly, again, not saying that's true. So in order for them to somewhat protect, well, themselves as a company as well, they needed a lot of rules. And again, we know Apex to be rule heavy, right? And that changes. So they go from rule heavy to quite simple rules, quite straightforward. So they needed a lot of rules to enforce as well people, or prevent people from gaming the system, if that makes sense. That led as well to a lot of manual reviews. Again, usually there's just a whole risk management team behind that, looking at accounts if they are sticking to the rules, etc. And then it becomes this back and forth where it's your word against my word. And that's one of the largest complaints that we also saw in the Trustpilot reviews. The rules were very open to interpretation oftentimes, where it just was the risk management team's word against your word, if that makes sense. And of course, you're going to lose that. So that's the tricky part. On top of that, that leads to a lot of payout disputes and denials. So the main question right here is, how do they keep the Apex identity, lot of accounts, cheap entry price, the identity and core without the drama and friction of those rules, long payout reviews, and denials? Okay, that's where we introduce new Apex right here. So what have they changed? 2 new programs. They introduced 2 new programs. Now, in one of the programs, they're going to have end of day drawdown. So they're going to have the trailing drawdown that they used to have. And on top of that, they're also going to introduce end of day drawdown, which is going to be the difference between the 2 programs, the main difference. Then right here, we also see that again, they are promising no payout reviews, so no payout denials as well with those new programs. That's the goal. Very bold claim. Can they realize that? I'm not entirely sure. There's some nuance that I do want to dive into later on as well. So right here, if you can get through the process and get the payout button, you will get paid. It will be approved. End of story. That is what Apex is standing for. That is what they told us. So right here, they also remove, there will be no MAE rule in those 2 new programs right there. No 5-to-1 risk to reward rule. There will be built-in scaling right there. So there will be scaling rules that we are also going to dive into. And there will be a 50% consistency rule instead of 30% consistency rule previously. Those 2 new programs, we're going to dive into them in more detail a little bit later on as well. First, I need you to understand, again, Apex send us some values or why they are doing these changes, etc., or what they are striving for, if that makes sense. Then they mention simple rules right here, black and white, no gray area, no interpretation of rules, which again is a big one. On top of that, what is also a very big one, it will not even be touched by human hands right there. And it's something I want to dive into as well, because that's quite unique for a prop firm. Nothing vague, nothing obscure, no arbitrary rules, no gimmicks. I think you get the point. No hidden rules, no fine print. So no human hands is quite a big deal. And the reason why that is as an ex-prop firm owner myself, I know how that works. Most of the prop firms are just not automated. So it's all manually reviewed. So for example, if you trade news, then oftentimes it's not like a AI or a computer is watching you and the moment you trade news, you get blocked or anything like that. No, it's actually a team behind it that's reviewing it and seeing what you're doing if you're trading news. And then they, for example, deny the payout. So that's quite a huge thing. Now, of course, there's trade-offs to that, because that could also, then you could also make the argument, if there's no manual review anymore, how good is the program and the automation itself to not have to deny payouts later on if people start finding a new way to game the system, if that makes sense. That's something we're going to dive into. But right here, usually a huge team is needed to review. Important to understand, they will still check for HFT, etc., hedging, etc., manually as well. Then, PipBack is built by ex-prop firm owners that give you unique behind-the-scenes insights. For more, join the Discord. Our Discord is basically like a prop firm intelligence center. We share updates, discounts, and unique insights that we can discuss in the Discord as well. Feel free to join, link in the description. Okay, payouts. So more values that they mention. 5 trading days, previously 8. No payout reviews, no denials. They keep mentioning that. No video reviews of your trading. No chart screenshots needed. Payout confidence, no surprises, no special treatment, all under the same rule set. You get the point. I mentioned right here, these are some bold claims. In order to pull this off, rules would have to become stricter and automated in some places. There has to be a trade-off, surely. Yes, there is going to be a trade-off. Program right here. So again, they state more values. Again, I think we get the point right here. Fairness, simplicity, freedom, clear path, trade your way. Freedom, trade your way. There are some nuances to that we're also going to dive into, because that's not necessarily the case. What about the old/existing Apex products that you might have? Those are now going to be named legacy products. So they are always referred to as legacy products. Those are the old existing Apex products right there. Okay, existing, when I was recording this video, it's when this video is live, it's the old Apex products, of course. So legacy products right here are no longer available for new purchase, not impacted by any new programs, no retroactive changes. Legacy PA accounts are not impacted right there. Okay, basically nothing changes. Legacy evaluation accounts right there are not impacted. On top of that, still remain on recurring billing as well. You can still reset those evaluation accounts as well. can be passed and converted to legacy PA accounts. So again, basically nothing changes. So yes, you can have a mix of legacy and new accounts as well. As long it's still the maximum of 20 accounts, it can be mixed. So you could, for example, have 10 legacy accounts and 10 new accounts, maximum of 20. Perfect. Now, basically right here, nothing will happen with your current accounts. You just can't buy new legacy accounts. So you can't buy the old accounts, if that makes sense, the previous versions. Okay, moving on. New accounts, huge changes. So what is new? What is changing? There will be an option for live trading drawdown and end of day trading drawdown, like we mentioned right there. So those are also the two new programs that we're going to dive into. The specifics of them a little bit later on. No more monthly recurring billing. It will be a one-time fee. So there's no more subscription, which is quite a drastic change, if that makes sense. Now, the reason why they made that change is because they were quite limited with what they could do whilst they were still having that subscription option right there. So, but what this also means is that there won't be any more resets right there because it's a one-time fee. Yes, it's still 1 day to pass right there, but if you now just fail, you just buy another account right there. So there won't be any resets anymore. Quite important to understand. On top of that right here, the reason why this is done is because, or one of the reasons why this is done is because they couldn't implement most changes if they still had subscriptions. So for example, one of the changes that they couldn't actually implement was bulk purchases. Now, myself, I've always been one person who's complained towards Apex, as in why can't we buy 20 accounts at the same time? And the reason why that is apparently subscriptions. Now, so what I think might also happen is if they will allow bulk purchases right there for, again, those one-time fees, then probably they will also add bulk discounts, I imagine. I could be wrong, of course. That's my opinion. That's the way I think of things. For example, you get an extra 5 or 10% off the more accounts you buy, if that makes sense. That's the way I imagine that could work. Now, what is also important to understand is that, well, this does feel like we are now going back to time limits. So if you're not familiar with how prop firms used to be, prop firms used to operate with a time limit. So you had 30 days, for example, especially in the CFD space, you had 30 days to pass the evaluation. If you don't do that, you just lose the account completely. That's basically the same thing right here. So there is more time pressure now being introduced, if that makes sense. Now, to be fair to them, they do mention that very little people keep an evaluation longer than a few days. So it shouldn't really have a large impact on the majority of the people. But again, the majority of the people is mostly gambling anyway, if that makes sense. So it really impacts the people trying to take it slower, which is a little bit of a shame, arguably, right there, which is something to really take into account considering your prop firm options as well. So people, and what I think, people will likely blow through accounts even faster, which also, of course, the reason why these changes happen is arguably just more revenue for Apex, right? More revenue for Apex right there because you're paying a one-time fee. And, well, I can imagine that people, they're not waiting for that new month. And instead, they're just 5 days buying 20 accounts. I can't pass those accounts. Perfect. Let me buy 20 new accounts right there after those 5 days. It's just burning through accounts more and more and more, if that makes sense. So arguably also more revenue for Apex right there, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that's just the reality, what it comes down to, right? Okay, let's introduce the plans right here. We have, first of all, the intraday evaluation right there. The intraday evaluation is the trailing drawdown version, just what Apex already had, if that makes sense. So the way that looks is the following. There's only 4 accounts right here: 25K, 50K, 100K, 150K. Those are all the sizes. That's it. The one-time fee right here is going to be 177, 197, 297, 397 right there, US dollars. Again, that one-time fee, most likely there will be an 80-90% discounts like Apex usually tends to do as well. So that will be more like, what is that, $20 US, $30 US, something along those lines. Not entirely sure. But that's probably what it would look like as well. Then profit target right here is going to be 1,500 for 25K, 50K, 3,000, 100K, 6,000, 150K, 9,000 right there. The maximum trailing drawdown here is intraday. Again, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000. No daily loss limit, but the huge change right here is maximum contracts. So 4 maximum contracts right there for the 25K accounts. 50K, 6, 100K, 8, 150K, 12 right there. Important to understand. And the access period, again, how long you can access those accounts is 30 days. In those 30 days, you either pass or you fail. That's it. So if you pass right there, perfect, you move on to a PA account and you move on to the sim funded account, if that makes sense. But if you don't pass or you're still in the middle of passing, you just lose it and you need to start over again, if that makes sense. Quite important. Okay, moving on. This is where the large changes happen. End of day evaluation. Again, for all these where we show the prices, that can still change and might change in the future as well. Important to understand. So here, end of day evaluation. Same account sizes that we have right there. Profit target, same. Maximum trading drawdown, the size is the same right there, but now it's end of day trading drawdown, so it doesn't trail with you as you are trading. Daily loss limit is now introduced right here. So 500, 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000. Important to understand the daily loss limit, they told us, is a soft breach, not a hard breach. So a hard breach is, for example, the maximum trading drawdown. If you just hit your maximum trading drawdown, then you completely lose the account, if that makes sense. It's a hard breach. But a soft breach is when you hit your daily loss limit for that day, you just can't trade the account anymore, if that makes sense. That's a soft breach. So you don't actually lose the account. Maximum contracts 4, 6, 8, and 12 right there. Access period 30 days. Same thing right there. So the real difference is the daily loss limit right here and the, of course, trailing end of day drawdown right there. So what is important to understand is that the contract sizes are different in evaluations versus live, which is something we're going to dive into as well. Both evaluations right there are still 1 day to pass. Okay, moving on. Side by side evaluations. On the left side, we have the intraday trailing evaluation right there, as we knew it, the good old Apex accounts. Now, well, the good old, not necessarily, but the same drawdown type right there. The real difference is, again, in the end of day drawdown, the daily loss limit right there. That's the real difference right here. If we move on and we move on to intraday PA accounts, then this right here is the moment you pass an intraday evaluation, you move to a PA account. This is what that would look like, what the rules are. The activation fees can still change right there. The intraday trailing right there, that's the drawdown. This is where it gets interesting. Scaling is tier-based right there for all the accounts. So the amount of contracts that you can use is based on which tier you are in on the scaling rules right there. So it's becoming stricter. You are becoming more limited in what you can overall do right there. Again, the positive change is that, well, if we have to believe Apex their claims, and I would love to believe them right there, but we would have to still see it in the future as well, how that works out, that you are going to get your payout. No matter what, you are going to get your payout. But you have to stick to, well, more strict rules right here and take into account scaling as well. So maximum contracts is lower right there as well in general, and what the maximum amount of contracts are. This right here, daily loss limit, DLL, daily loss limit, is also tier-based right there. So tier-based is something we're going to dive into in just a second. I'm going to show you that. Now, consistency rule goes from 30% to 50% right there for all accounts. Payout split, still 100%. Maximum payouts, you can only have 6 payouts per account. So the changes right here is scaling, lower amount of contracts, daily loss limit, consistency is now 50%. Maximum payouts are now 6, and we will get to this later on as well to fully explain what happens afterwards. Okay, so the intraday account flow. This on the left right here is the evaluation. This on the right there, that's the PA account, the sim funded account right there. So on the left right there, the evaluation, if you pass that, you move on to the live, or well, not the live, the sim funded account, the PA account right there. That's for the intraday account. Moving on to the end of day PA accounts right here. So some changes in comparison to the intraday account. So we see the activation fee is a little bit higher. Again, that can change, still might change right there. Potentially the larger accounts right there might have a larger activation fee as well. What's important to understand right here is the main difference is the end of day drawdown right there compared to, again, the trading drawdown. Scaling tier based, yes. Maximum contracts, DLL tier based, yes. Consistency rule, payout split, maximum payouts as well. Basically the same thing. End of day PA account flow right here. On the left, the evaluation. On the right, the sim funded PA account right there. If you pass the evaluation, you move on to the right. This is what that would look like. If we move on and put them side by side right there, it's important to understand you can still have 20 accounts. They can be mixed, like we already mentioned. So on the left, we have the intraday trailing PA account right there. On the right, we have the end of day drawdown PA right there. The main difference is the trailing drawdown, which is, again, of course, end of day and intraday trailing right there. That's the main difference between these two. Then, if we move on right here, scaling and daily loss limit, where we're going to dive into a little bit of the specifics regarding the rules, etc. on the PA accounts. All the PA accounts will have certain scaling rules and daily loss limits, which are replacing the MAE rule. This is for both programs, what we're about to see. So for both programs right here, if we take a look at the 25K performance account, then we have a profit range right there of 0 to 999. If you're in a profit range, you can only use one contract right there. You can only, or the daily loss limit is actually only $500. That's in tier 1 right there. Then on top of that, you have tier 2 right there, level 2. If you make more profit, you're allowed to use more contracts right there, but you only have a maximum contract size of 2 right there on the 25K account. Daily loss limit right there also increases the more profit you have right there. So essentially, again, just a scaling rule. 50K account, same thing right there. A little bit more nuance, more details right there. Again, the more profit you make, the more contracts that you can use, the bigger the daily loss limit overall becomes right there. So what is important to understand is that this is what they have done to put controls in place. Again, if you really look at this, yes, you are getting payouts. Well, you are getting guaranteed payouts. They mentioned that, or well, at least no payout denials, but you are just a lot more limited in what you can do. And for most people, I do have to also be nuanced, because from what we see as an ex-platform owner as well, for most people that are just genuinely good traders, to just understand what they're doing, it really doesn't have a large impact, if that makes sense. This really limits the gamblers that are just buying 20 accounts and are just flexing on Twitter, if that makes sense. So there will also be a little blue tab with info. That's what they mentioned, where you can see which level you are in, what is required for you to move on to the next level right there, and what the constraints are within every level, if that makes sense. Okay, now what I'm concerned about a little bit is platform glitches and then having to still deny the payout after. That would be quite plainly said horrible, to be honest. Because if that happens and still having to deny the payouts after everything we've gone over and the guarantee of payouts, etc., no payouts being denied, that would be absolutely horrible. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But again, that is something to consider before you buy an account right there as well. Which is again something we'll dive into a little bit later at the end. If we move on right here, then the 100K performance account right there, that looks like this right there with 5 levels. And we have the 150K performance account, which looks like this right here, which also has 5 levels right here. The more profit you make, the more contracts you can use, the bigger the daily loss limit right there is. Okay, the daily loss limit, like we mentioned, is again a soft breach. It's not a hard breach, like we mentioned. Okay, core products right here. So the 2 products we went over are what they call the core products. They are designed to keep Apex what Apex has always been, if that makes sense, cheap to enter, etc., and more sustainable in the long run. Now, from what I picked up and from what I understood is then, okay, these won't be the only products. There are new products coming down the line as well. This is just to keep Apex as it is, if that makes sense, and then expanding to newer products, newer programs as well, if that makes sense. At least that's what I picked up right there. So that's something to that's quite interesting for in the future. Payouts right there. This again is for all PA accounts, no matter the program. Up to weekly payouts with 100% payout splits, minimum 5 trading days that meet the required minimum daily profit, down from 8 previously, right there. Minimum payout amount is $500. 50% consistency rule instead of old 30%. We also see maximum 6 payouts per PA account, and we have right here what that looks like and what that would be in reality right here. The account size, the minimum trading days, the minimum daily profit right there that you need to make for it to be a trade day, in order for it to count as a trading day. Safety net right there, minimum balance to request a payout as well, and the maximum payout again that we're going to dive into, because the maximum payout is quite interesting as well. Okay, right here, payout number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6 right there. So this is the maximum amount of payouts that you can have right here. And this is the maximum that you can have as a total right there. Now, this is, again, well, quite interesting in general, because what does that actually imply? That means that you are going to be moved to a live account after you have those 6 payouts. So after 6 payouts on a PA account, the account will be marked as complete/graduated after 6 payouts. Account either is coded to transition phase for potential live, or allowed to continue onto more PAs, or coded for no more sim. And that depends a little bit, because a lot of this will be determined by the number of accounts that you have. I'm going to explain that in a little bit as well. So Apex Live will be pushed more. It feels like they are moving towards that, where they could arguably move towards even a brokerage, allegedly, what I think might happen as well, what I think is happening in general in the prop firm industry, where these prop firms are trying to get closer to brokerages, where they limit your overall payout. After you take too many payouts, you just move to a brokerage account, if that makes sense. So they need to make rules somewhat stricter in order for that to happen as well, which is quite interesting. I'm not necessarily saying it's negative, positive. I have my opinions about that, but I will also share that in a different video. So if you have 20 accounts right there, you'll be pushed to live. If it's only one, they'll let you stay on PA most likely. So again, a lot of this will be determined by number of accounts. If you have a lot of accounts, you will most likely just be simply pushed to live. If you only have one account, for example, they'll let you stay on PA and you can just do your thing, buy more accounts until eventually you have a lot of accounts. You will also be pushed to live, if that makes sense. 6 payouts right there might sometimes be earlier right there, and might sometimes be later as well. This is where I do have my problems here and there, because they do mention a lot of things regarding, yes, after 6 payouts, you're moved to this, but then a lot of it is still open to interpretation, if that makes sense. And they mentioned the whole thing was, it's not open to interpretation anymore. It's objective, it's simple. And there's still a lot of nuances that we have to take into account as well, whilst this is getting stricter, if that makes sense. So that's something to take into account. Okay, PA trading rules. So essentially, it's the following right here. Adhere to Apex user agreement and prohibited activities list. Do not reach maximum drawdown. That's the rules right there that they mention. But the prohibited list right here mentions hedging, HFT, employing trade copy services, unsustainable strategies. I mentioned right here after. Is that not arguably still subjective? As in, are you not still going to create problems with the risk management team because someone is doing quite well, is getting payouts, and someone from the risk management team is going to say, well, I think this is an unsustainable strategy. What does that mean? You know what I mean? So it's still a little bit subjective, arguably, in some places. So I'm not entirely sure what to think about it right here. I think, I think the no payout denials is a very good step right there. But is that going to be realized? Because I think you're still going to run into certain problems, if that makes sense. So that's quite important to understand. And the reason why it's quite important to understand is because I think then other prop firms are most likely going to be potentially more interesting. That's the reality of what I think of it. But let's see. Manipulation of the simulated trading environment right there. Unauthorized users, account and resource sharing. Okay, we know that. Perfect. Maximum 20 PA accounts at one time. Perfect. Okay. Now, if we take a look right here at my advice and what I would advise after everything that we have just gone over, because that's everything that Apex has changed. And it's important to understand that if you love Apex, you love the ID, I would say go for it. Go for it. If you're an Apex fan, go for it. You can use code PIP right there, PIP, to always get the highest discounts right there. But what would be my advice generally is I would give it some time, to be honest, to see how this plays out and whether it actually makes other firms more interesting, if that makes sense. Because I imagine a lot of firms will jump on this, will somewhat scrutinize Apex and will say, well, we don't have this. Come with us, if that makes sense, because we are now a lot more interesting than Apex, if that makes sense. So I imagine that's also what will happen quite a lot. And that's something to take into account, where I imagine other firms can become more interesting as well. On top of that, doesn't really matter what you do, join the Discord. The Discord will help you a lot. Again, we're a platform built by ex-prop firm owners. We give unique insights. We do pretty cool experiments and projects. In my opinion, feel free to check out the other videos. Feel free to join the Discord and discuss it with us as well.